All right. Hi, Jenny. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Sandy?
Really good. Welcome, everybody, to Chicks Talking Pics. We're going to do something a little different this session, this episode. We're going to talk more about aperture than we normally do. And we're using two images from Jenny and two images from me. So I hope you stay on board and find out what we have in store for you. Jenny, where are you at today? I think you just got back from the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta.
Yeah, you got it right. I was there the first week of October. It happens every year. The first two complete weekends of October, so it shifts around a little bit. 9 days of flying, weather permitting, and I was one of the official Fiesta photographers this year for the first time.
Yay, congratulations.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a bit different doing an event like that for, not just for personal reasons, but having to have actual assignments and produce things and get them all set and to them on a deadline.
Yeah, that's interesting. So did they ask you for a certain number of images, or how did that work?
They didn't ask us for numbers. They did give assignments so that they could make sure every part of Fiesta got covered, things I didn't even think of. They needed things like the park and ride and propane and things that you wouldn't normally want to go shoot. But for media purposes and for logistics, they need photographs of just, vendor row and all sorts of things that are behind the scenes as well as in front of the scenes.
And what did you get to do?
They had an attempt at RC balloons, remote controlled balloons, the largest collection of them. I don't know if they hit the right number, but they had over a dozen RC balloons. That was one of the ones I signed up for. And then they just expected us all to shoot everything we could. One of the things I made a point of shooting was competition, because I used to fly competition, so I actually had a better insight as to what to expect as the balloons were coming in and what to look for and when they were going to throw their markers. And some of the other photographers expressed difficulty trying to figure out how to shoot it, and I was just loving it. So
great. Well, when can we see some of those images, Jenny?
I'm actually going to put together a little monograph of some of the better images and put it on my website sometime in the coming month.
And your website
is wolfhartimages.com.
There you go, everybody. Make sure to check out Jenny's images. That'd be really fun. I can't wait. So super. Well, I just got home yesterday from a little over a month on the road. I led some workshops in Badlands National Park, or in around the area in South Dakota, western South Dakota, also in the Great Salt Lake area. And then I spent a week with my husband in Lone Pine, just relaxing and photographing whatever I could find there. Fall color was okay. I think fall color is still going to be better going forward. So if you haven't been to Lone Pine yet this season, this October, you can still find some good color there. So super. Well, okay. So like we said, this was different. This is going to be different. So Jenny and I are going to go on to the first image. We're going to talk aperture, f-stops, why we use them, what we're trying to accomplish. Does it work? Did it not work? So let's go on to the first image. Let's get you over there. This one is one that Jenny sent me, and it's a beautiful image. Love this image. So Jenny, you want to tell us about it, and then we'll go to the next slide that tells your settings.
Yeah, so a few years ago now, we had what's called a super bloom in California, where the poppies were just exploding all over the place. This is the California poppy. It's a state flower. And so I went to one of the poppy fields, and Basically sat down amongst the poppies with a macro lens and used a diffuser to soften the light, and just tried to get some interesting angles on them.
Where'd you place your diffuser? Up on top, above them to keep from that harsh light hitting them?
Exactly. So this image I took later in the morning, so the sun was getting harsh. So I just put a diffuser, if you're not familiar, is just a translucent, usually collapsible fabric, so that I hold it above that between the sunlight and the subject, and it'll soften your light so you don't get harsh shadows.
Yeah, the only way to do it, in my opinion. That's great. Really nice. Okay, let's go to the image here that has your settings on your settings on it. So ISO 100, which would be expected in this. F5, which Jenny will talk about in a minute, at 1/250th of a second. So Jenny, tell us why you picked F5, an aperture of 5.
So I didn't want too much distraction. I mean, you see that there's obviously flowers in the background, but they've been blurred to the point of just being colors for the most part. I wanted the viewer to focus in on just, the the flowers in the front. So by using that shallow aperture, I was able to focus my vision a little better and what I want the viewer to see.
Yeah, really well done. And I like that you have three of the poppies that stand out to me the most.
3 is
Yeah,
always a good number in photographs for
Yeah.
some reason.
Yeah, super. So if you had used an F, say 16, 18, somewhere up there, I think it would have totally changed the image and never would have been as appealing as this image is, because it would have gave you so much more in focus that it just would have been too cluttered.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the things, if you want to remove clutter, use something, a smaller f-stop number, which, as we know, is actually a wider opening on the camera. And so then you can still have your background without it being as distracting as if all those poppies were in focus, it would have just been too much to look at.
Yeah, totally agree. And it looks like it wasn't windy that day because you're only at 2/50th of a second. So, I mean, you didn't have to really use a fast shutter speed there.
No, and I was on a tripod, and like I said, I was down on the ground amongst them, and it hadn't really gotten windy yet.
Wow, on a tripod. I did not even expect you to say that. No, because for me, I would have just laid down on the ground and probably shot handheld, but yeah, it's beautiful. Just really nice. Really well done.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, this image is one of mine that I took recently, and I was a little disappointed in still. Besides the grasses that are coming out of the little squirrel's head, the depth of field was really, it'll surprise you, because here I'm going to show you what it was. It was at f20. I was fairly close, and I was shooting with a 500 lens, I believe. So I was, I started out at f8. I had these two little guys stand for me for a long time. Couldn't get both of them in focus. Focused on the front one, focused on the back one, focused in between them. And then I realized I just needed, they were further apart, further back and forward from each other than I probably thought when I was shooting this image. So I went all the way up to an f20 and still didn't get both of those critters in focus. I put this one in because I think people struggle with that a lot when they have two subjects, and you have to know what lens you're using. You have to practice with that lens, that camera and lens combination. What else, Jenny? Have you had situations like that? Like your flowers, both of your flowers, the first two flowers were very much in focus. The third flower, a little bit more out of focus at f5, but you were shooting with a much wider lens.
Yeah, I was shooting with a 50mm lens, and my subjects were much closer to each other. Whereas, like you said, these ones, they look close to each other in this, but you get that compression factor from using your zoom lens of making them seem like they're closer together. So, like you said, that can be a problem when you think you're shooting like at f20, you should be getting pretty good depth. And, maybe you're not getting quite as much as you thought just because of the distance and the lens you're working with.
Yep. There's apps for that. There's an app I use or have used in the past. I don't use it anymore, but obviously I probably should go back to using it after this. Called Tack Sharp, TACK Sharp. And it gives you, it lets you put in the lens and the distance from your subject and and it tells you what will be in focus. How far out. Do you have an inch of focus? Do you have a foot of focus? Do you have 10 feet of focus? You can play around with that app, and there's others out there that do the same. Photo Pills, that has it built in, all sorts of things. But that's a really easy, simple, and that's kind of all it does, that app.
So it's basically calculating your hyperfocal distance.
Yeah, basically doing that. And does everybody know what aperture is? We're talking about f-stops or aperture. That's the little diaphragm in your camera that opens and closes and lets the amount of light in that you're asking for, depending on where you are on that scale. Does that explain it pretty good, or you want to add to that?
And the thing that isn't real intuitive, f20 is actually a smaller opening than f5 that I was shooting with. So the smaller the number, the larger the opening, and the more light you're letting in.
Good. Perfect. This is exactly what I wanted to put out there for our viewers, Jenny, this discussion about why we're using it and what happens, and that we fail also. I don't consider this a great image. I love the little guy on the right because he's tack sharp and his whiskers are beautiful, but the guy on the left is just, kind of distracting to me. So anyway, I tried. I gave it a try. Yep. I'll know better next time, won't I? And I was worried at f20 if I was going to get too much of the background in focus. And yeah, maybe those sticks of grass. Anyway, all things that you need to consider when you're shooting wildlife or anything. Watch your edges, watch that, that depth of field, your aperture, because you control your depth of field with the aperture. Yep. All right, Jenny, yours is up next. Go ahead and tell us about this image.
Okay, so this is, if you're ever flying in a balloon, this is a view you will get when you look up through the burner. It's about the only way you can get a picture of the balloon you're in while you're flying. I shot this a couple times because I was trying to get not only the burners, but the balloon itself. And it does fall off a little bit and isn't exactly sharp all the way up. But, like you said, we try. So I was using a small aperture to try and add some depth to this.
Okay, let's look at that. Let me pull that up. There you go.
So f22, we're flying early morning, so it's not real bright out. And I was shooting aperture priority, which is why it was 1 second, because I wasn't paying attention to that. my camera was doing that, and my ISO topped out at 500 because I had it on auto ISO. So I could have increased that, and then I could have gotten a better, gotten it off 1 second, and that might be why we're not totally tack sharp on this either, because it is handheld, no tripod.
Yeah, interesting. That was when you told me it was 1 second, I was thought, what? Because it doesn't look, it looks great. I mean, it's a great image. It tells a great story. I love the color in it, everything. Yeah, interesting, very interesting. So I like hearing the story behind, the image, that you had it on auto ISO and things like that. Interesting.
Yeah, I tend to shoot with that with my, I'm shooting with a Sony, and but I can't adjust how high the ISO goes, and I hadn't messed around with the default settings at the point when I took this. So that's something I certainly would raise up so it can go higher.
Sure, you were in a balloon and probably busy doing other things.
No, I wasn't flying this one, but yeah, I was busy just, taking pictures and
yeah.
Just looking around and doing that.
Yeah, very good. Very good. All right, we've got one more image. I threw one in here because everybody asks me, how do you get those buttery backgrounds? And it has everything to do with aperture and the lenses you're using, in my opinion. That's, let's look at the settings here, and then I'll go on with that. So I was at F8 here. So when this coyote approached me, I did not bait him or anything like that. He was in a field and he was running towards me in a field. He stopped for the very split second that I got a couple of frames of this off. And so my settings were a little higher than what you would normally have for a portrait like this, because he was running. Like I said, he was running. I was trying to capture the action. So I was at a high ISO at 1250. This was kind of end of the day. So I had lower light, later afternoon light kind of on him. And F8 to try to get as much depth of field as I could, because he wasn't that far away to begin with. When you're talking about aperture again and depth of field, the farther away your subject is, you don't really need an F8. You can go wide open, shooting an F4, F5, 6, or whatever you have, whatever your lens will allow, and still get most everything about your subject sharp. But when this guy was pretty close to me, I didn't want to miss on any kind of, you can see where my sharpness falls off, like right behind those ears. You can tell it all falls off. So if I wasn't shooting an F8, if I was shooting wide open at an F4, I think I said this is probably my 500 lens again. And, I might not have got his tip of his nose to his eyes, and his ears are kind of falling off a little bit too. But that most important part, I don't know that I would have got that all in focus. You can see his whiskers. So, but for buttery backgrounds like that, the background needs to be far enough away, and you need to have a fairly small or a wide open aperture. Jenny, go ahead, make some comments on this.
You covered it. I mean, I like the way it falls off. I mean, you see his body, the fur is getting soft as it goes away from his face. So, it draws the viewer more into the eyes by having the softness fall off as quickly as it does. And you don't have the distractions, and that's what's so important in a portrait like this. If you were shooting it with a more closed down aperture, there, who knows what you would be seeing, excuse me, in the back, there'd be all sorts of distractions.
Yeah, weeds and ugly grasses is what it was.
So,
Yeah. So yeah, so that's kind of our different take on today's program. I thought that was kind of fun. It's something different to do. We're going to try a couple of these. I think if Jenny and I sit down and talk about, shutter speeds,
Yep.
or just the three components of the exposure triangle. I think that would be a good start for some people that are just beginning or learning about doing this. So if you would like your images discussed or critiqued, or whatever you might like whatever you might like to get out of it, please send them to chickstalkingpics@gmail.com. We'd prefer that they be no larger than 1920 pixels on the longest side. Try to keep them that size so they show up big on the screen. And put them in JPEG format. And just use your own content. That would be really great. Jenny, what did you think about today's show?
Yeah, it was a nice change. We get to talk about each other's images, and hopefully viewers pick up some new tips, or maybe learn something they didn't know, or just reinforce information they did know.
And I think if they have questions, they could certainly write into chickstalkingpics@gmail.com.
Yeah.
It's not necessary that you have an image for us to review, but we certainly would like to have more images come in and give us a chance to talk about them.
You can also put comments on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
You don't want to email them.
Yeah, that'd be really good.
And speaking of the YouTube, if you want to find out when our next episode is going live, go ahead and sign up for the channel, hit subscribe, and the little bell will give you notifications when a new episode goes live.
Great. All right. Well, everybody, thanks for joining us, and happy aperture shooting. Good night, everybody.
Bye.